Thank you all for joining us today. We appreciate you giving us the time and having your interest in the electronics recycling and data destruction that we manage here at the MSU Surplus Store and Recycling Center. My name is Katie Deska and I work as the education coordinator here. We're excited to have Tim Heckeman here today. He is the IT administrator for our department and oversees the Surplus Store and Recycling Center's computer department. So Tim has been working with electronics for over 23 years and has been with the department in its various iterations for over 15 years. Tim says he finds this subject matter interesting as he likes to diagnose problems and find solutions for these digital challenges of today. Today, Tim is going to talk about how the Surplus Store and Recycling Center ensures data security and manages the electronics that have been discarded by the campus community in a responsible way. He will talk about how electronic waste or e-waste is very important to be managed responsibly. And he'll also discuss the services that we offer as a department to our campus departments and also to the MSU community. So before Tim begins, I'd like to just give a brief overview of how the Surplus Store and Recycling Center works. So every year we process between 20 and 25 million pounds of material. And on average, we divert about half of that material away from the landfill. We collect our material from academic, research, event spaces, residential buildings, farms, athletic venues, and more. And as a whole, we are responsible for collecting and managing all the things that are discarded by campus, which includes our recyclables, our surplus goods, food waste, trash, and of course, our IT equipment and electronics. If you look around you, I'm sure that you are surrounded by various devices. And when those are owned by MSU, the proper protocol is to have them sent back to the surplus store if they are going to be discarded. So when departments do want to get rid of a piece of equipment, you can submit a request through our website. If you go to msusurplusstore.com or msurecyclingcenter.com, you will find the link there, and I'll put that in the chat. That way we can pick that up and bring it back to our department. We get everything from desktops and laptops to radios, game consoles. We get a variety of things through our MSU Community Reuse and Recycling Program, which is available to our MSU community. So Tim will also mention that. The computers, AV equipment, and electronics, they all come back to the computer department for processing. And from that processing area, we sort the material into a few different areas, a few different categories. Material that has value and it can be wiped clean of its data, fixed and resold. Secondly, material that needs to be processed and then sent out for responsible recycling for electronic waste. And thirdly, material that needs to be shredded for the purpose of maintaining that data security. In a nutshell, the services that Surplus Store and Recycling Center offers to the campus departments include free pickup of these electronic devices or IT equipment, free electronic waste recycling, free data security on the disposal end of things. We also offer laptop leasing, and of course we sell items through the Surplus Store for you to purchase, either for your department or personal use. And then we also assist with asset retirement. We're not going to talk too much about that, but that's something that you could speak to your fiscal officer about for more. And with that, I'm going to zip it and pass it over to Tim. He is the IT administrator, so please, Tim, take it away.
All right, thanks, Katie, for the overview and the introduction. As she mentioned, we do have a lot of different services that we offer, and I'll be primarily going over e-waste and data security. So hopefully my screen is shared there. So let's start with e-waste. What is e-waste and how we deal with it? E-waste is an electronic product that is unwanted or not working. An easy way to figure out if something would be considered e-waste is, does it have a circuit board or a power cable, or does it require batteries? It can contain a number of toxic materials included, but not limited to beryllium, cadmium, mercury, lithium, and lead. And putting this stuff in the landfill is a horrible idea. There's leaching that happens, and it ultimately can get in our food and our water supply. If you don't drink the water directly, you might eat a fish that swam in contaminated water or vegetables that grew in some soil that the material got in. The surplus manages all the e-waste for all equipment that MSU is getting rid of. And every 2 years, we put out an RFP or a request for proposal, and we review multiple responses. After reviewing them all, we decide on a company, and that company we'll work with for the next 2 years. Surplus pays all the fees and transportation and cost that ensuring all of MSU's e-waste is properly recycled. We've also have done on-site inspections of some facilities to ensure that what they're doing is what they actually say they're doing. There are some different laws that apply to consumers and businesses. Businesses and universities are held to a higher standards since they have more electronics to deal with. While it's legal for a consumer to dispose of e-waste in their trash, it's illegal for businesses and for MSU to do so. Since MSU purchases a large amount of electronics each month and is also getting rid of just as much, we have to ensure that we're doing the right things legally. So surplus handles that. And just because it's legal for a consumer to put something in the trash obviously does not mean it's the right thing to do. Batteries are a form of e-waste. On the market today, they're probably the most dangerous, but also the most prevalent is lithium-ion batteries. They're everywhere, and since they work so well and they have so much adaptation, you can see them in a vast array of devices like cell phones and laptops. One of the biggest problems with them is that they're prone to catching on fire. The way that they're designed and with the pressure of the market to make everything smaller and smaller can lead to a higher potential of fires. One example is the Samsung Galaxy Note in 2016. I'm sure most of you recall some of those phones catching on fires. So since 2013, we have recycled at Surplus over 1.58 million pounds of e-waste from the university. That's just the weight of what we sent to our vendor. It does not include the metal that we've recycled from these computers or the plastics we've taken off or components that we've pulled and resold on our store. How we handle e-waste is a very strict procedure with a reputable vendor. We know their downstream, where they're sending their commodities, what's going to waste versus energy or landfill. And like I said, we've done on-site visits and we've verified their downstreams. So we know that what we're sending to these companies is not going to a landfill or getting buried in the backyard. So I take this issue serious. Well, when it's not done correctly, it's a very big problem. Some vendors will try to make as much money as possible by burning the material to get the precious metals out of them, or burying a CRT monitor in the ground and then calling it being recycled. This has happened on multiple occasions, and a new vendor pops up, says they're doing things correctly. They get material sent from universities or people, they handle it poorly, make some money, and then close down and reopen with the new name, and nobody's held liable. So I just wanted to go over a couple pictures of why we take this seriously. In the upper right, you can see a bunch of cell phones. They've got pretty decent value on them, pretty high gold content, and other precious metals. And what they're doing is they're taking them apart, probably prepping them, removing the batteries to either burn them to get the material out or possibly removing them by hand. In the lower left, you see a pile. There's some CRT monitors in those. CRT monitors are really hard to recycle. They're heavy and they contain a lot of material. One of the hazardous material in them is leaded glass. And there's two big dangers of dealing with CRT monitors. One is that they can implode, not explode, but implode. The monitor has a tube that's vacuum sealed. That's how it actually displays its image. And if that tube is broken, it could spray poisonous phosphorus covered shards of glass all over. I remember once back in the old building, this was probably 13 years ago, I had set a monitor down and the plastic front of it broke, snapped, and it tipped forward, and the monitor hit the ground glass first, and it probably hopped up about 2 foot in the air. Luckily, it didn't get that much glass, but it was still a big eye opener for me. The other thing a CRT can, as a hazard, is it can hold 1,000 volts, over 1,000 volts of electricity in its flyback circuitry. While this normally dissipates after it's unplugged, sometimes it can hold it for longer periods of time, and it is enough to stop somebody's heart. So these are very dangerous. This is not something you just want to throw in your trash. You don't want your trash company dealing with this stuff. And it really should be dealt with someone who knows what they're doing. We still get CRT monitors and televisions today, which surprised me as that technology has been outdated for so long. I don't know if departments are storing them in closets or if they're still used, but it does still surprise me that we're still getting those through. Just to touch on LCD monitors are also pretty expensive to recycle. They do contain a small amount of mercury, but they're not nearly as dangerous as CRT monitors. So in the upper left, you can see a pile of e-waste around a streak or a creek. This is probably the same river that they use to bathe and drink in, same water that they use. This is usually the case. In the bottom right, you see a pile of power supplies, and people are pulling them apart, separating anything out that doesn't have value, and they're going to recycle the metal and then burn anything else that they don't want. In the lower left, you see that gentleman is burning some cables. This is the quickest way to get the copper out from inside the wire, although it is extremely hazardous. Those fumes are very toxic. In the upper right, it looks like what they're doing is take burnt cables and pulling out whatever sheathing was left on it to get out the copper and sorting that through. Just a few more pictures. This is a big issue. What happens is these vendors will buy this material or get this material, not really buy it, but they'll get material from people that don't know what's going on. And then it'll send it to these third-party companies that send it overseas. And there is money to be made in this, but when it's not done properly, so it's horrible to the environment, especially these people that are breathing these fumes, these kids that are breathing these fumes, and it just affects the rest of their life. So what are some steps that we do to ensure that MSU's waste is not being handled this way? One of that is certifications. There's 2 certifications out there, eStewards and R2. These are both third-party, globally responsible electronic recycling certificates that help prevent materials from being recycled in third world countries in a manner that is unsafe to the environment. These certificates help us determine what companies are taking the issue seriously, and while having the cert doesn't guarantee they're doing the correct thing, it does help us determine what companies we want to focus on. A very good resource if you want to do your own research is ban.org, and Katie will have a link in the end, and Katie will put a link in chat to a lot of these sources that I'll kind of say throughout this presentation. But ban.org will show you hotspot problems, areas of concern, how you can help. They also offer, or what they've been doing is a project called the eTrash Transparency Project, and they put trackers in different electronics like copiers and monitors, and they drop them off at different companies. And then they track where where the downstream is, where these vendors are sending these things, and then they'll post that report on their website. So you can look at that as well. And they've been doing that for a while now, like probably about 5 or 6 years at least. Due to either data security or old age or no longer having use, about 75% of the electronics that we get through, and it's a rough estimate, is e-wasted. So most of what we get through from electronics here, we do have to pay to recycle. Data security is the other thing that I'll be talking about here. So what is data security and how do we handle it? The surplus store is the last line defense for data security for all outgoing equipment on campus. We wipe every single device that comes through with data, and the list of equipment that has data on it is growing extremely fast, especially with the Internet of Things out there. Most things have some form of data on it that needs to be wiped. Most recently, we had some treadmills that came through that had Facebook account access on them. So if we were to sell those without wiping it, somebody would have access to the last person's account that had logged into that treadmill with Facebook. In order to wipe those, we needed to purchase some special software, and if we couldn't get that software, we would have to remove the drive or install a new one. If the hard drive is embedded on the unit, then we would actually just have to e-waste the unit. So some of these things, if we can't find solutions, we actually just have to e-waste it, even though they could have a value to them. When we get equipment in that we haven't seen before, we have to do a lot of research on it. What does it store? Does it store data? Does it have components that are removable that could have data on it? Can it be wiped? How do you access it? Can the storage media be removed, replaced? And if you remove that special software, is there a way for us to get our hands back on it so we can install it and have that device be in working condition? When it comes to medical and lab, it's extremely hard. We always err on the side of caution and remove devices and e-waste them if we're unsure. So this does mean that if we get an expensive piece of lab equipment that might be worth $20,000 or $30,000 and we cannot wipe the data off of it, it gets sent to e-waste, and there's no resale on that. One of our assets that we have is we have an on-site shredder, and we can shred media and hard drives in there. If a drive is under a certain size, we do 500 gig, or if it's not a certain connection, then it gets logged and shredded. We remove the circuit board from the back, that gets recycled through our vendor, and the hard drive gets shredded after we log the size of the drive as well. We started tracking serial numbers on our hard drive specifically in about middle of 2017. From the mid of 2017 to 2020, we shredded 6.5 petabyte of data and wiped 8 petabyte for a total of 14.5 petabyte. We also didn't really do much in 2020 due to COVID. And I know those numbers are kind of hard if you're not into computers. So to put that into perspective, 14.5 petabyte is about 274 billion Word documents, or 9 billion photos, or 7 million full-length movies. Now, I do have a little video of our shredder in operation, so I'll show that now. There's two sides of this. As you can see, the left side has 3 large teeth designed for crushing the hard drive, for the larger, thicker hard drives. You can't really tell this. That's the left side. On the right side, there is thinner teeth that are designed to shred cassette tapes. And we don't mix the side. This is the side. We don't mix those up. So, for example, if I was to put a hard drive in this size here, those smaller teeth would not be able to crush the hard drive, and it could. We put a VHS tape in the left side, the tape reels could get ripped up underneath that. So we have very specifics for all types of media.
Tim, I'm sorry, can I interrupt you really quick? Could you just repeat the 2 types of materials that would go in either side? The video was a little bit crackly on your voice. If you could just say that one more time.
Gotcha. So the left side is for platter disk hard drives. So it's more of the older style hard drives that are thick and metal. The right side is going to be designed for media. So CDs, VHS tapes, anything that has like a reel-to-reel, that kind of stuff. So we do offer a certification of destruction for certain requests. We do track every drive that we wipe or destroy, but we don't give out certifications unless it's requested. So if you want a certification, there's a small fee, and what we'll do is we'll give you a container, and you can put your hard drives or your media in the container. And when we get it, we will log it, process it, and then you'll get an email with a list of you can see this picture here. It's a list of serial numbers of the size of the drive and the status of it. So in this case, these were all destroyed. If it was media, you'll get just a weight, because there's no way to really add all of that kind of media together to see the size. So what we do is we drop this container off, you fill it up. When our drivers come back, they'll come with 2 padlocks. They lock the unit. The drivers do not have access to that, so they cannot open that up. It comes back to our facility, and the only person that can open those up is the person that's going to be doing the logging and shredding. So why do we take data security serious? Every year, IBM puts out a report. This is the report from 2021 for data breaches. The average cost of a data breach is $4.24 million, with the average record being $180. So your personal information is on average about $180. So we do take this serious. We do not want this information for MSU. We don't want this to be a lawsuit for MSU. We don't want any of this stuff to get out. So that's why we take this very as serious as we do. Some things outside of our control. When someone leaves the university and they go to another university and they want to take the research with them, or if a computer just leaves, somebody leaves and they just take. So unfortunately, it has happened in the past. Well, unfortunately, never gets sent to us, so we have no way of being able to wipe that information. We have had some departments in the past refuse to send equipment to us and sell it directly either to their staff or online. And this is against MSU's policy, and we've worked that out. But when we hear of something like that, we report that to internal audit, as it's not our job to deal with. One of the other big things is leasing. So if you lease computers or copiers with an outside company, it's a big issue. So say like you lease computers from a company and then you send them back and you didn't do any data security, you didn't wipe the information properly. Now MSU's data and software is out in the wild, and we've got no control over that information. The bigger issues with copiers, because leasing with copiers for departments is pretty big around the campus. So every time something is copied, printed, or scanned, it gets stored on an internal hard drive. And most of these copiers do not have an encryption or a way to wipe it. There is a special software for Canons that you can pay. It's like an extra $1,000 to get this software that will encrypt your data, but nobody buys it because it's more money. So it never gets done. There are a number of stories that have run with data on copiers that have gotten out. And the one that comes to mind is 2010, CBS News did an undercover article, I guess if you want to call it, where they went to a warehouse. There were 6,000 copiers waiting to be sold. They went and they pulled the hard drives out of some of them. They found social security numbers, medical records, insurance claims, pay stubs. This was from both copiers from the government, copiers from universities. It was just all over the place. And it was a lot of information that was just there free for the taking. Unfortunately, when we get copiers in here, they are all e-wasted. There is no way to properly wipe them unless the department had purchased that extra data security, and I've actually only found that once. So we pull all the paper, we pull all the hard drives, we check the machine to make sure there's nothing left over in the scanning bed, because we found some documents, sometimes pay stubs that are still in there. We then log those hard drives and destroy them. I've also reached out to Xerox, Canon, and Toshiba about trying to reload their software so we can get some reusability out of these copiers. And they said the only way to do that is if I became a technician and worked for them, or worked for a third-party company that works on their behalf. So there's just no getting those. So how we wipe devices. If you're into computers, I can go into a lot more detail, but I didn't want to put too much tech speak in here. So we're just going to go over a little bit just to give you the basis. Platter disk hard drives are the older style hard drives. They are the thicker metal ones that have a spinning disk in the middle of it. So what we do is the recommended 3-pass wipe. In 1995, there was a department called the Department of Defense. They created a recommendation on how to deal with sensitive data. And they call this document they had was called NISPOM, N-I-S-P-O-M. They had different levels of security for different types of data, high security and top secret. Some years after that, in 2014, the NIST took over the recommendations for data security, but they used the same recommendations and added on to and expanded for the new storage types that were not around in 95. Most of the government data is recommended for physical destruction, but for non-governmental, so non-top secret or secret information, the recommendation was a 3-pass, which what that means is there's a software that would run through each sector of the hard drive and write random information 3 different times, essentially. The larger the drive, the longer it takes. So as we're getting 3 and 4 terabyte drives, some of those can take 48 hours to wipe per drive. So we do have a machine that we can add 20, I think it was 23 different drives. We got 4 machines that have 23 drives each, and we can wipe all those at the same time. There's a slew of different software applications you can use. We use one called Active Disk Kill. It is a paid for service. There's a bunch of different ones out there. They all do the same 3-pass, but they'll have different functionalities. Active Disk is nice because it will give us a certification and do a verification afterwards. Platter disks are, or not platter disks, solid states are completely different. The DoD wipe doesn't really work on them. So we use a firmware that's built into each drive called Secure Erase, and the software that we use to access that firmware is called Part Magic. These drives have another firmware on them called wear leveling. And what that does is it protects each sector from the drive from getting written to so often. So each sector has a certain amount of times it can have data written to. If one sector is getting written to more often than others, the firmware called wear leveling is going to say, I'm going to protect this and I'm going to put this information into another section. What that does is allows you to have your full drive, in this example, a 256 gig drive. It will keep that size forever. If it didn't do that, it would probably slowly die, and you might get 200 gigs after 4 or 5 years, then be down to 100 gig after 7 or 8 years. So that's why wear leveling is here. The problem with that is the operating system writes information to a certain sector, and it goes back there and tries to get that information. So the operating system, in this case Windows or Apple, doesn't understand what the hard drive is doing. So when it comes time to wiping this information, it tries to wipe a sector. The hard drive says, yes, you did, even though it doesn't. So you can't actually trust that a 3-pass is actually going to wipe this information. So what they've done is they've added the Secure Erase feature, and what that does is send a little voltage spike down the entire thing, and it blanks out the entire drive. The nice thing is it does it a lot faster. It takes about 2 minutes to do a drive. The only problem is you have to do one drive at a time. There's no way to do multiples. So go over a couple more devices here. Cell phones, we do remove the SIM cards, we encrypt the drive, we factory reset. Sometimes if the encryption is wonky, what we'll actually do is copy random information, hook it up to my computer and copy random information over to ensure the entire drive's filled and do a factory reset. We do pull the SIM cards. Some SIM cards have had data on them. I found cell numbers and text messages, which is weird on SIM cards, but these phones were from overseas, so I don't know if they operate a little differently. So just to be safe, we do pull every SIM card from them. If the device is Apple locked or Google locked, they will get destroyed. There's unfortunately no easy way around that. So we do have to recycle a fair amount of cell phones and tablets due to them not being unlocked when we get them. One of the odd ones that people might not think about is Motorola radios. They are a pain to deal with, and in order to reset them, we need to get special cable, special boxes, and special software for each different model. There's no factory reset option. I have to manually go in and actually check each individual line myself, and some of the information they can store is cell numbers, frequencies used by emergency response teams and whatnot. So in order to get the software for this, it was actually kind of funny. It took me 6 months. I had to do 3 different applications through Motorola, and actually had to have 2 interviews with Motorola to verify that I was who I said I was, and that this is the reason why I was using it. The next section I want to go over is services we offered. Katie kind of touched on that a little bit, but I'll go over a little bit more in detail. We do have our own trucks that we send out on campus and to pick up surplus material. Most of the time this is free. However, there might be some situations where there's a fee depending on what's being asked of us to do. We do deal with all the data security and e-waste for the entire campus. And one of the more recent services we offered is laptop leasing for department use. So to touch on our laptop leasing, what we do is we refurbish some of the better units that we get in. We make sure there's 8 gig of RAM in each unit and a solid state in each device. And you can either get these leases with an operating system, Windows 10, or an operating system if you want to put your own image on there for a department. During the COVID lockdown, we offered 90 laptops to departments free of charge for 6 months. We had the unit capability to help out, so we were glad to be able to do that. Last year, we leased a total of 418 units. And what we do is we charge $30 per laptop per month, and we only do monthly leasing at this time. Doesn't mean you have to hold on to it the month, but that's just what we charge, is the $30 for the month. So resale, we do try to sell as much as possible. I kind of touched on that earlier. To kind of go over Windows machines and Apple machines, because we do install Windows on certain machines and Apple's on Apple OS on other machines. If it has a Windows license on it, if there's a sticker, you can legally install the most recent version of Windows. It's called a digital entitlement or a digital upgrade, and that code will be therefore tied with the latest version of Windows. If the computer does not have a license on it, we do not put an operating system on it. We've toyed with Linux in the past, but they just don't really sell. So we put it out there as a tested and working machine, but it does not have an operating system installed. Apple doesn't really have a licensing scheme, but they do kind of block you off from installing the latest operating system unless you have a computer that's a certain age or not. So we have to find the age of the computer and then install whatever the latest operating system that it supports is. How we install Windows machines is we install things over the network. So we'll say, like, we get a computer, we pull the memory in the hard drive and put it all in a pile. The hard drives all get wiped, marked, logged, and tagged, set into a different pile. When we go and we process machines, we pull the hard drive, pull a wiped hard drive that's been tested and wiped, put it in this machine, ensure the machine has 8 to 16 gig of RAM, and then we use what's called, you can see a picture there of fog, which deploys an image over the network, and it usually takes 10 minutes to push out images over the network. There's other options out there, but what we use is what's called fog projects. So it's a Linux software. Then we ensure that all the drivers are updated. We make sure that the activation code is using the activation code on the machine, and we run updates as much as possible. Community reuse is a service that we offer in partnership with our e-waste vendor. So material can be dropped off from MSU employees, faculty, staff, student, or alumni. Some material has a cost, others is free. We do charge $10 for TVs and monitors, as we have to pay that fee to our e-waste recycler. We do not process this material. This material, if it's electronics, goes straight to our vendor. The reason that is because the Michigan law, there is a if MSU or if we were to take material in from the public and then disassemble them and sell them as ourselves, then we would be labeled a recycler, and there's a large fee involved in that. We don't want to get into that. So we just offer the service for our e-waste vendor. Funding, how do we fund this? Well, unfortunately, we cannot provide credit on a lot of electronics items. This is due to the cost of recycling and data security, and the amount of time and the amount of money involved in us doing that for the entire university. But there's some exceptions. So if you have newer equipment or if you have a bulk load of good, decent equipment that is worth something, reach out to me. We can figure something out. But for the most part, we generally fund our services through we cover the cost of our services by reselling of what gets in. That's pretty much what I had for the presentation. There is a link here, and I think Katie will put it in the chat, and of all of the links and sources that I use for this presentation, and we can go to some questions and answers here. So let me read these. Chris Hewitt says, with the possibility of breakage of CRT monitors, is it dangerous for the public to be a volunteer removing them? No, not necessarily. I mean, they're pretty robust, but you don't want to go around tossing them around like they're nothing. Like you do want to be safe involved in it. If the back of the CRT monitor, if like the plastic housing is removed, you don't want to touch that. You just make sure you get someone who knows what's going on, because you could touch the wrong thing then. And that's a higher chance of the tube imploding with the plastic cover off on the back. That's where it's supposed to implode is into that. So, John, let me read this real quick. You mentioned how hazardous batteries are to dispose. Consumers toss tons of them in the trash at the time. Yes. Because alternative ways of disposal are often hard to come by. Why doesn't MSU have any means of battery disposal for faculty, students, staff, generally on the campus? So this is a tough one. That is a very large cost. I don't have the numbers off the top of my head, but it's somewhere of $1 or $2 or $3 a pound for battery recycling, and it gets extremely expensive, and there's no funding for it, unfortunately, at this time. We are looking into ways to try to fund that, but as of this point, we don't really have an answer at that point. Any other questions?
Yeah, we got another question. Sean asked about the hard drive shredding. How frequently do you do that, and how many can you shred in a day or an hour? Does it take a long time for that?
If it's just straight shredding, it depends on it's kind of weird. It depends on how large the hard drive is, because the larger it is, the thicker the platter is, the longer it could take to shred, or the size of the drives. There's the regular 3.5 versus the laptop size 2.5. If we had them processed, which means if we pulled the circuit boards off the back, we logged them when we were just shredding. It's a good question. I've never actually logged how many we've done. If I had to throw a number out there, we could probably do a couple hundred, maybe. But that's just a guess.
How often do you tend to do that shredding?
Oh, it depends on what we get through. Surplus ebbs and flows all the time. So sometimes we might be focusing on testing televisions and wiping them, or printers, and then the hard drives we don't get to until the next week. It just kind of ebbs and flows. We do some sort of hard drive, either shredding or wiping or removing the circuit boards weekly.
Okay. So if you're doing it weekly, what has been the impact of the Internet of Things on data security? How have you guys been able to keep up?
A lot of research. We get a lot of stuff through that we just don't know what it is. You've got to look it up, figure it out. If we do not know what it is, we tear it apart and we look for hard drives or some kind of data storage medium on them. It is a lot of research. It's very time intensive, and you have to know what you're looking at. Once we kind of figure out a process for these units, then we'll write up on our wiki. We've got a computer department wiki that tells how to process all of these different things and things to look for. And there's a lot of training involved because everything's a little bit different.
Right. Yeah. You talked about the treadmills as an example of one that, you need a specific device, a key to access. So what other kind of oddities are there that, we don't think of as typically storing data, but that might actually have data that's sensitive?
Oh, there's a lot. Pretty much anything you can get. I mean, I remember we had a chair that came through once that actually connected to Facebook. It would actually monitor your biometrics somehow, and then it was tied to maybe it wasn't a Facebook, it was a Fitbit account, or it was tied to some account. I can't remember the details on it, but I was just floored that it was a chair. Like, why? Or refrigerators connecting to the internet, or Facebook as well. I mean, most anything tries to connect to a third-party company anymore, and with that username and password information, we have to make sure that that doesn't get out. So,
Right.
Smart televisions, you log into your Netflix account. Well, if we don't wipe that, and we can't wipe it, then it gets sold and somebody has access to your Netflix account.
So what's the big deal if someone has access to my Netflix account? Like if I don't have any sensitive data, say on my work computer, how important is it that you really wipe my data?
Well, if they can get, say like they can get your email or your email address, and if they can get your password from that login, and your Netflix and your email account login password are the same, then they have access to your email. they have access to your email. They could figure out what bank you have and then send a request for a password change, or then have access to your bank. Like this long line of, if you have one thing, you can pretty much get access to most anything else. I see Eric has a question here. Are there things on campus units can do to better support us to make things easier when you send e-waste over for processing? Yes and no. One of the big things recently is we've been getting a lot of cell phones in. Some of them have been locked, or tablets that are locked, iTunes locked or Google account locked. Those immediately have to get e-wasted because we just can't get around them. So it is a large waste of what could be resold back to campus or have a useful life that we do have to pay to recycle. Other things is get rid of your CRT monitors now so I don't have to see them again in the future. That'd be great.
There's a couple other questions. In general, if people are interested in learning more about what we do and seeing how you work, can MSU departments get a tour of our processing area?
Yes, you can reach out to our front office and they will schedule you can get a tour scheduled. You can get a tour of the building, and we can also give you a more detailed tour back here. If you're into tech and you want to have a more detailed conversation, I would love to have that conversation. I just don't want to bore too many people here.
All right. And on the larger topic of, this scope of electronics and planned obsolescence and right to repair laws, what do you think about the concept of right to repair legislation and making it easier for, consumers to repair it, different devices, or even, like you said, for us to be able to get in there and wipe the device itself?
Yeah, that's huge. Right to repair is very important. You look at these new phones that come out, and they're not really new. They've been doing it for a while, that have batteries that are glued in. They're not easily fixable. That's one and done. It's a real waste. There's a nice company that is starting a new laptop. I think they're called Framework. And it's a modular laptop. So you can buy this laptop with different specs, and then everything's modular on it. So you can buy a USB-C slot and it slides in the side, or extra expansion. And that's a really good framework. So if you're looking for a laptop, this company called Framework that has a modular laptop, it's all about the right to repair. They even offer up schematics of how their boards are built. So if you wanted to do customizations, it's completely free. And their business model is, if we offer these different upgrades for you, that you're going to come back and buy from us because it's easier to get it from us than to do it yourself, but you're more than willing to do it yourself if you want to try it out. So that hopefully that business model takes off with cell phones as well. I know there was a cell phone that tried to do that, but it was a little bit clunky. I think it was a little bit too early for it to happen. So.
Okay. And what other resources do you know of that are out there for people who do want to learn to repair their own electronics? Can you think of any?
iFixit.
Mm-hmm.
I think Indestructibles is a website, and just really YouTube. I mean, you can find anything these days. Back when I started in computers, you couldn't find this information unless you knew somebody who knew the information, and now it's readily out there. It's easy enough to just Google it or YouTube it and find somebody to give you a video on how to do it.
Okay. And just switching gears, we have another question about batteries. What type of batteries can departments send to the Surplus Storm Recycling Center?
Well, we do get a lot of batteries from laptops, lithium ions. A lot of things have batteries in them. Every computer has a battery in it. Even the desktops have a little CMOS battery in them. We do recycle as much as possible. It is expensive, and like I said, we're trying to find a way to fund battery recycling. We do take lead acid batteries. We work in partnership with EHS to make sure that the batteries that we get in are handled properly.
And that's Environmental Health and Safety Department on campus?
Yep.
Mm-hmm. Okay. So we don't generally take back batteries from.
We don't take batteries open from departments at this point in mass. Like I said, we're trying to figure something out, but there's no funding for it.
Right, the cost of it. Yeah. And so just a future, I guess, looking question. What do you think of what kind of future does electronic waste recycling have? One thing I found pretty interesting, when thinking about this was, the difference between the fact that, gold, silver, copper, some of these other precious metals or metals that are in these devices, have an inherent value on the market in comparison to, say, something, like, the plastics that we recycle. It's a lot harder to market that when you can get, primary sourced oil for a good price. So what do you see as the future for electronics recycling in general, at least in the US?
Well, I already know that there's some departments that are looking to source most of their material from used electronics. For example, cell phones have a lot of gold in them. So it's actually cheaper to get the gold that they need from a cell phone versus from a mine. Or lithium from battery recycling. There's are companies out there that are looking to start sourcing more and more from recycled material as the process to recycle this stuff gets cheaper and cheaper.
Mhm.
So, I mean, ultimately, as these new processes come out, hopefully that this market gets more expanded and more desired upon.
Mhm. Yeah, I think
Oh,
you make a good point, and that kind of speaks to what you had, started off with, which was some of the risks associated with recycling that's not done with certain precautions and controls put in place. So to remind everyone that folks are not out there doing this because it's ignorance per se, but it's a need for the financial revenue. It's a need for the money that they can get from harvesting those materials from those electronics.
so see here, John, realize battery disposal is very expensive, but you just said it's illegal for businesses to toss e-waste in a landfill. So how do we justify expense excuse every day? Yeah. I don't have an answer to that. I don't do the policies. I'm just trying to, find solutions for these things. Now, technically, you can throw alkaline batteries in the trash. That's not illegal. That's not hazardous waste. Lithium ion is hazardous waste. We will take lithium ion batteries. We will take the lead acid batteries. Nickel metal hydrate, we do take those. But as a university, there's no funding for it. So like I said, the alkaline batteries, so anything under 9 volt, it is legal to throw in the trash. Not that it's the right thing to do. But without higher up help or without a campaign to get this changed, it's not going to happen.
Mm-hmm.
Any suggestions on individuals we can escalate? Well, I will say this, our building, so we have a new building here. It's not really new, it's 10 years old, but to me it's new. We would not have gotten this building without a student-led initiative that wanted to have a better recycling facility on campus. Students have a lot of power on campus. If there was some students that wanted to lead an initiative and champion this project through, it would get listened to. I would probably say that students had the key to changing most things on campus rather than most faculty or staff do.
And just to add on to that, I'm going to drop a link in the chat that has a bit of our history of how Surplus Storm Recycling Center were able to get the funding, like Tim's talking about, that created the building that we're currently in now, although we are in a building payback plan. Our director here, Chris Jolly, I mean, he makes a good point in the chat that the biggest challenges with batteries and funding is how to keep people from bringing them from home, since there aren't a lot of options for personal recycling of batteries. And so while there is a case to be made indeed for getting that recycling for our departments more so than we already have, we do face those challenges of how do you regulate or control that kind of it's not dumping, but that's the only word I could think of. It's just bringing your material to some place that really it's not actually what we should be taking. So just another note on that. Let's see, we have any other questions from folks coming in? Another one was that why do you have to destroy data? Is there just a way to reformat electronics?
Not always. Half the problem is how do you connect to the units? So a treadmill doesn't have a USB port that can readily be connected to a computer that can be read, then be wiped. It's how do you access the unit? Is it embedded on the board? Does it have an input to it? What type of storage media is it? Is there firmware on it that allows it to be secure erased? Because it has to be embedded into the chip to do it. There's just a lot of different hurdles, and it's not an easy solution for a lot of these Internet of Things. They're not made to be wiped and resold. They're made for one purpose, and they don't think of the end game with them, I guess, or the afterlife of them.
Right, that's the bottom line you're talking about. And so with the variety of materials that you get in or that we get in here and that is managed in the department, how do you handle, working with the computer department staff, and how do people learn how to either repair things, or look and see that this is one that needs to be shredded, I can't get this wiped, or, how does that work?
Well, for desktops, it's pretty easy. We actually have a whiteboard essentially that has a list of keep models to don't. This based off of the year, the processor, what the latest operating system supports. So there's like a checklist for those. Same thing with laptops. We go by model number. Televisions, obviously we don't keep CRT monitors. We do resell LCDs, but they have to have a certain native resolution. They have to look good. They have to have a certain size. They can't be discolored. We do test monitors for discoloration, for bad backlights, copiers. I mean, I didn't get into any of this, but we can only sell HB printers, HB laser printers, because the normal factory reset doesn't work on them. So we have to do a special cold reset. Everything is unique. We have a wiki for all of this stuff. So when the staff comes in, it's a very long training process, because I set them down for a week on one project, get them trained on that. Once I know that they know that, they get moved to another project, and it just goes on and on and on.
Okay, thank you. And one last question, at least I think it's the last one here. Sean wants to know, what's one of the strangest electronic devices you've gotten in to recycle? What's one of the weird items you find?
The homemade stuff. I think we've had some robots that were made from robotics, gets through and it has weird mechanics, weird boards. It rolled around. I think it was supposed to be like a medical unit where a tablet was held onto it and it would roll up to somebody and somebody would interact with it. But with that stuff, like, you can't research it. You just have to know what the board is. And again, it's just a lot of research.
Good.
I see Paul do have a link with instructions for how to get hard drives or tapes to you for destruction. If you go to our website, I think Katie has it in the chat.
So
there's a request you can submit, a perf or a pickup request, and we will go pick those up. If you want certification in the notes, just make sure you write data security certificate needed. There's an option for that as well.
All right, great, thank you. I'm putting in the link for MSU Recycling, and then at the top bar, you just would click submit a service request, and you can send it to us that way. Also, feel free to reach out with questions. This is the recycling main email. And just I would like to relay this kudos from Chris to you, Tim. He says that Tim is modest, but folks should know that he's a recognized leader in his field across all colleges and universities. So thank you so much, Tim. We appreciate your knowledge and sharing that. Thanks, Riley, for that positive note too. We're glad that you guys found it informative, and would like to, encourage you to follow up if you do have questions, or if you are interested in, having that, tour. We're happy to do that. And as a thank you for attending, we'd like to give you a coupon code for the surplus store. It's for 15% off in store or online, and the code is in the chat, and it's valid through November the 30th. That is case sensitive, so be mindful of that if you are using it online. Then I'll also put in a plug for our next town hall coming up on the 18th of November. And this topic is with our artist in residence that we partnered with the Broad Art Lab on. And so she will be speaking about her experience working with some materials that we provided her from Surplus and Recycling. So there's a link for that. Lastly, just like to close with a few tips on reducing electronic waste, and Tim, feel free to add in as you'd like. Number one, to use products for as long as possible. That's the single most effective thing that you can do to minimize electronic waste and the negative effects on the planet. Secondly, to choose products that are designed, like Tim said, to enable a more circular model and can live multiple lives by being repaired, upgraded, or refurbished, supporting those companies that do have those policies in place, or at least are advocating behind it, and or using some recycled content in the fabrication of their devices itself. Also consider if someone else might find the product useful when you no longer use it. As MSU community members, you can utilize the MSU recycling and reuse program. You can sell it or donate it, and continue to shop secondhand for your devices if you can. And, I think also ask yourself, what do you really need, and how can you avoid getting fooled by, the draw of shiny new objects, right? And just making sure that you're being responsible with your device if you are going to discard it at the end of its life. So I think with that, we can wrap up. Tim, would you like to say anything?
No, think you covered everything. Appreciate it.
All right. Well, thank you everyone for attending, and we look forward to hopefully seeing you on a future town hall. Have a lovely day. Thank you.